Hello, hello. It is Wednesday, and we have another awesome podcast for you with the VBAC link. This is Megan and Julie, and we have our friend Rebecca on today, and she is going to tell you about her birth story, and we're so excited. We were just chatting a little bit before the episode began, and she was kind of talking about some things that she was doing all throughout her pregnancy. You guys, at the very end of her pregnancy, she has a picture of her doing a toe touch on the trampoline because she's a tumbling teacher. So she
at
exercised.
41 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, that's amazing. We should get that picture, Rebecca, and put it on our stories today.
Yeah. Will you please send it to us?
Yeah, I will.
Oh, that'd be awesome. So she exercised during pregnancy to encourage, good fetal positioning. She used 3 sisters, which I love 3 sisters. Use meditation and all of those things. So we're so excited to hear her story and her journey. And then, of course, we have a review of the week before we do jump into that.
Of course, we have a review of the week. Before we get started on the review of the week, I really am so excited to hear Becca's story today because she actually lives in a tiny little town that my mom lives in down in South Central-ish Utah. And we have a really fun story when she was pregnant when I went down to visit. And I think I'll just let her tell that part of the story, but it's super fun. And she knows my mom, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I'm just really excited for this story. It's just one of those things that just make you smile. And every time I remember about Becca and her cute husband, I smile. It makes me happy. So our review this week is from MKTW12 on Apple Podcasts, and the title is Eye-Opening. And she says, from Perth, Western Australia, which P.S., I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but Australia is like my dream vacation. Like we need to go teach a class in Australia or something because I need a business expense.
That would be amazing.
We should. One day we should go. Anyways, from Perth, Western Australia, hello, Julie and Megan. Just want to say massive thank you for creating this amazing podcast. My sister-in-law, Lauren, who has had an emergency cesarean like myself, is trying for a VBAC next year, but since has introduced me to this podcast as I have had 2 cesareans and that have completely traumatized me. In a couple of years, my partner and I will be trying for our 3rd child, and I'll be doing my all to make sure I have a VBAC. I have never felt more educated and inspired since listening to all these amazing, powerful women and them sharing beautiful and some very sad birth stories. Thank you once again, and I can't wait to share my story one day. Love, Milena. And we need somebody from Australia on the podcast. We have to. I mean, it has to happen someday. All you Australians out there, email me. info@thevbaclink.com. We want to talk to you and we want to connect with you. And even more so, we are so grateful for these reviews. When you take time out of your day to message us on social media or leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Google or even on Facebook, it warms our hearts. It makes us so happy. And it's just one of those things that keeps a smile on our face and really keeps us going when we're working with the podcast. Right, Megan? Are you smiling right now?
Yes. No, I love the reviews so much.
You are tuned in to the VBAC Link podcast with Julie Francom and Megan Heaton, VBAC moms, doulas, and educators here to help you get inspired for birth after having a C-section. Together, they have created a robust VBAC preparation course along with this uplifting podcast for women who are preparing for their VBAC. Although these episodes are VBAC specific, they encourage all expectant moms to listen and educate themselves on how to avoid a cesarean from the get-go. The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is not meant to replace advice from any other qualified medical professional. Here are your hosts, Julie and Megan.
Do you want a VBAC but don't know where to start? It's easy to feel like we need to figure it all out on our own. That's what we used to do, and it was the loneliest, most ineffective thing we have ever done. That's why Megan and I created our signature course, How to VBAC, the ultimate preparation course for parents that you can find at thevbaclink.com. It is the most comprehensive VBAC preparation course in the world, perfectly packaged in an online self-paced video course. Together, Megan and I have helped over 800 parents get the birth that they wanted, and we are ready to help you too. Head on over to thevbaclink.com to find out more and sign up today. That's thevbaclink.com. See you there.
All right. Well, we can't wait to get into your story. I'm going to turn the time over to you to share your awesome story and inspire all of those out there listening.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my husband met Julie at his work because that's where Julie's mom works. And I was like so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, you met Julie Frankham. That is so cool. And I had to share the selfie that they took on the VBAC Link community because I was like, look at me.
It was so fun.
So anyways, I'll start with my first pregnancy. So it was a really healthy pregnancy. I was really active. Really the only thing is I didn't know about pregnancy positions. So I accidentally slept on my back a lot. I lounged leaning back a lot. So everything other than that pretty much went good. I did gain a ton of weight. I gained over 80 pounds. So they were like, stop eating carbs. You're done. So other than that, at 39 weeks, the nurse to my midwife was like, oh, you're 39 weeks. You can get a membrane sweep. And I was like, oh, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's this really cool thing that you can do to make labor start. And I was like, that sounds great. So I talked to my midwife about that. And her and my husband looked at me and they're like, are you crazy? You want a natural birth. You want to be naturally minded and you're asking about a membrane sweep. You do not want that. So I was like, okay. And we continued on until almost 41 weeks. It was a couple of days before 41 weeks where they were like, okay, well, now you're starting to go a lot overdue. And this is when risks increase, your placenta giving out and meconium.
Oh, the placenta dying. Oh, that's my soapbox at the moment. Oh my goodness.
So they were like, so now I think you should do the membrane sweep. And I was like, no, you guys told me that wasn't a good thing to do. So I don't want that now. And I think that I can just go into labor on my own. I just need a little more time. So I signed the waiver and they had me do, can't remember exactly what they're called. Are they called NSTs?
Yeah, non-stress test.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they had me do those every day that I went past 41 weeks. So I had just one of those, and then I think it was that day or the next day I agreed to a membrane sweep. And the next day we woke up and went to breakfast, and we took a nap before we were going to go to our next NST, and I felt my water broke. So I got up, went to the bathroom, leaked water all over the house, and went and told my husband that my water broke. And he was like, no, I think you just peed. And I'm like, well, if I just peed, it's all over the house. So the hospital class that we took, they told us that if your water breaks, it's not an emergency, but you do need to start making your way to the hospital. And we had the ultrasound to go to anyways. So we showered and got ready and went over there. And they admitted us and they checked me, and I was 4 centimeters and I was not having any contractions that I could feel. They said that I was having contractions that they could see on the monitor. I just wasn't feeling them. So we walked around the hospital, did curb walking, and I sent my husband to go get me something to eat. And that's when my contractions started, and they were really intense. So I had no early labor at all. I just went right into active labor. And I kind of had a moment where like I wanted to start crying, and I had to just get strong. I told myself, you're never going to have a unmedicated birth if you lose it, like right now. So my husband came back. I told him that I really wanted my midwife there. So he went to talk to the nurse. I just got into the bath.
Was this in Richfield?
Mm-hmm.
Who was your midwife?
So I don't know if I want to tell who my midwife was, just because
Okay, we'll talk at the end.
Okay, I have good things to say, but I also have maybe just a couple of things that aren't very good.
Okay, I need to know. So we'll have to chat at the end. Okay, go on.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I just get like shivers really, really bad when I'm in labor. So I had to spend a lot of time like in and out of the shower. My husband was a lifesaver. He did counter pressure like almost the whole like 16 hours. He was just doing counter pressure. My midwife's assistant kind of acted as a doula, and she was awesome. My favorite part of laboring with my first pregnancy, we went to go like walk in the hallway, and my midwife, like before I came out, she told me, she said, these other women can see you now. They're in labor too, and you need to be a good example of how like a laboring woman is supposed to act.
Oh my gosh.
And I actually,
holy cow.
I actually loved it. Like I'm kind of like I guess more kind of like a competitive person almost, like and so I loved it. Like I just felt like so empowered and so strong right then at that moment.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so let's see, I had meconium in the water, and it was just coming out with every contraction, and it started to get like really thick and dark. And I also kind of stalled at an 8. So I didn't realize how long it was, but my husband told me later that it had been like 4 or more hours that I was at an 8. And they said that the baby was starting to be kind of distressed. So they told me that I would have 1 hour to progress, and if I didn't progress, that I would have to have a C-section. So at that point, I just kind of gave up. I had like worked so hard that I couldn't like imagine working that hard for a whole nother hour just to have the C-section. So they checked me again, and I was still at an 8. They even said that when I was contracting, I was going down to a 6. So we went back to the C-section. I saw my mom in the hallway, and that was like the first time I let myself cry. I held her hand when they were doing the epidural, or not the epidural, the spinal tap. I was having a contraction, and I just like buried my face into my midwife's chest and just held on to her for dear life. So the midwife assistant just stayed by my side and explained the whole process to me. And when he was born, they brought him to me, and I just like, everybody was kind of looking at me like waiting for my big response, I guess. And I just felt like, I almost felt kind of irritated or anxious that they weren't making sure he was okay, because they told me that like his life was in danger. So I was like, why do we have this kind of time if his life is in danger?
Right.
So they took him, and he was having trouble breathing. So they told us that they were going to have to life flight him. So they told my husband that he could either stay with me or go with my son to be life flighted up north. And so my husband looked at me, and I told him, just go with him. And it was so funny because before that, I just needed my husband so much. But then right then, I just needed him to be with our son. So they took him away to kind of work on him and took Billy, my husband, to get prepped to be life flighted. And they were just fighting to get an IV into my son. They poked him all over the place. He just had little pokes all over his body. And they actually had a doctor come in to sew an IV into his belly button, into his umbilical cord. Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
I have.
Yeah.
Into his belly button.
Yeah, they get it in the vein, like the umbilical
Really?
veins.
Crazy.
Yeah, so they did several breathing treatments on him, and they did a video chat with the doctors up north, and they decided that he did not have to be life flighted up north. So that was really good. We were really happy about that. So it started to be like over 10 hours, and I still had not seen him. So I was like, I kept asking the nurses, I was like, when are you going to bring him to me? When are you going to bring him to me? And they just kept telling me soon. But my husband could just walk down and go see him. So I was like, well, what do I have to do to be able to walk down there and see him? And they said, well, people usually aren't ready to get up, but I guess if your legs aren't numb and if you can go to the bathroom, you can walk down to him.
I mean, can they put you in a wheelchair or what? Like
they didn't even suggest that. So I walked down to see him, and they were doing a breathing treatment on him. So the nurse that was doing that was kind of like irritated that I was there, and I started bleeding all over the floor. So they had to put me in a wheelchair and take me back to my room. So finally, a couple hours after that, they brought him to me, and he had like an oxygen monitor hooked up to him that we had to watch really closely. And we started to try to breastfeed, which we struggled with really bad. And the nurses started to suggest formula, which I was like, no, I really do not want to do formula. I was like really stubborn on that because nothing went my way. I was like, I'm breastfeeding this baby. So they sent in this nurse who was totally rude, but I loved her. She came in and she grabbed my boob, which would like hurt. She was so aggressive.
Jeez.
Grabbed my baby's head, yeah, and got him to latch. And so even though she was just so rude, I loved her because I don't know if we would have ended up breastfeeding if it wasn't for her.
Mm-hmm. Did it feel aggressive? Like, were you like, whoa?
I cringe at how hard she grabbed my boob.
Yeah. But good. I'm glad it worked out though.
Yeah. So I found out later that his chin wasn't tucked, and they said that if they had found out early in labor that they could have done something, but because it went on so long that there was just nothing that they could do. So he was 9 pounds, 4 ounces, and 21 inches long. So he's kind of a big baby. And we just struggled postpartum really bad. They sent me home a day early. They said that I wasn't really getting any help from the nurses. And I kind of reluctantly agreed to go home, but that ended up being kind of a mistake because I didn't feel like I got the rest that I needed. And I was just ended up falling asleep a lot in unsafe places with him and stuff because I was told that if I fell asleep in bed with my baby, if I bed shared, that I would kill him. Oh. And so I was terrified of doing that. But then I ended up being in way unsafer places. So I finally found out about safe bed sharing. And when I did that, everything changed. I went from being just depressed and anxious and tired to everything perfect. So around 18 months postpartum, well, I guess when my son was 18 months old, I got pregnant with my second. And with our first appointment with our local midwives, we found out that no hospital around our area would do a VBAC for an unproven pelvis. So if you have not had a vaginal birth, they would not do a VBAC. So they told us that was fine, that we could still do a VBAC, but we'd have to go either north or south they told me that around 37 weeks, I would have to go stay there and just live there until I went into labor.
What?
Yeah. So that's kind of just like what we planned on doing. We didn't even look for a provider until I was like 35 weeks pregnant. Like I really like put it off. So yeah, at every appointment that I had with my midwives, they just kept telling me that like I had a platyploid pelvis shape, and that my pelvis was just really small, and that I can try a VBAC, but they just didn't know if it would happen because my pelvis is so small. And the one midwife kept telling me that her daughter decided to go with a repeat C-section and she loved it, and just different things like that. Yeah. So first we called a midwife in St. George, and her receptionist was like, oh, midwives don't do VBACs. So you can't go to a midwife. You have to go to
what?
Yeah. And I was like, okay. Like I knew that she was wrong, because at this point I had been on the VBAC link. I've been listening to your guys' podcast and on the community. So I knew she was wrong.
Like I've heard of a lot of midwives delivering VBACs.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. But so then I called the American Fork Valley midwives, and they're like, oh yeah, let's make an appointment. So my first appointment with them went awesome. I was like almost expecting for them to want to do like a pelvis exam and all that, and they didn't. They just talked to me. I talked to her about how my midwives had wanted me to go stay up there at 37 weeks, and she was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. So I just figured that that's kind of what I had to do. So I went onto the VBAC Link community, and I asked other women if they had traveled far for their VBACs. And it's about 2 hours for me to go to American Fork. And a lot of the women were like, oh yeah, we've gone 3 hours. We've gone 4 hours. We just went when we were in early labor and just labored at like the park or something, and it was fine. So my next appointment, I told them, I said, I really think that it's unrealistic for me to be away from my husband for that long. So I think that I want to just come in early labor. And so that midwife was like, yeah, that sounds great. I don't see any problem why you can't do that. And she talked to the other midwives, and they all agreed that that would be just fine. So my next appointment with them, and I really only did like 3 or 4 appointments with them. I was supposed to I met with the OB, and I was super nervous to meet with the OB because I had heard a lot of like horror stories of the OB just being awful. And I really expected him to want to do like a pelvis exam. And I was like, I am keeping my pants on during this appointment. There's no way. And I was just like terrified, but he was awesome. He came in there and he was like, the uterine rupture is like less than 1 to 1.4%. You look like a good candidate. We're really excited to have you. He said, hopefully you never see me, because if you see me, that's bad news. He said, but other than that, you're awesome. Just try not to gain a lot of weight, which I had already been working on.
Well, you're like 30 weeks pregnant right now.
Right.
A little late for that conversation.
So I had actually emailed the midwives of Ina Mae Gaskins. What is that? Their little...
At the farm?
Yeah, I messaged them and told them my situation. And they had kind of already told me the same thing. They said big babies are kind of hard to get through a platyploid pelvis. So just try your hardest not to gain a ton of weight. So I had already been kind of working on that, just eating really healthy. So I throughout that pregnancy, I only gained 25 pounds. So that was good. I did chiropractor care, but it wasn't with certified. I can't remember what it's called.
Webster.
Yeah, Webster chiropractor. It was just a local chiropractor. I did go to a chiropractor up north that was Webster certified for one appointment. And he saw all the surgeries that I had, and he said, "Wow, you're a fan of the knife, aren't you?"
Oh,
And I was like, not really.
Goodness. Holy cow.
Yeah. So yeah, around 37 weeks, I started getting prodromal labor, which with my first, I didn't have any kind of Braxton Hicks or early labor or anything. So I was like, wow, I'm going to go into labor soon. And of course I didn't. Just like every night I started having like kind of consistent contractions. So around 40 weeks on my due date, I started having consistent labor. It was 10 minutes apart. It wasn't like very strong, but it was the longest that it had lasted. So I decided to call my husband. I was not going to tell him that I was in labor because he is so anxious. Like, just making that drive and doing everything made him so anxious. He was even like, "Are you sure that you even want me there?" Because I'm just such an anxious wreck. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I just told him to bring home food because I didn't want to make dinner in labor. And so he got there, he got home, we ate, and he could just kind of tell something was up. And so finally I told him I thought that I was in labor, and I just didn't know if we should head out or if we should just go to sleep or what. So I told him that, and he was like, "Well, I'm not going to sleep after that. So you can sleep if you want to, but I'm up." So I laid down for a little while and I couldn't sleep, and the contractions got a little bit stronger. So around 10 or 11 p.m., he took my son to my in-laws, and I like cried because he took him. I like am such an attachment parent. I did not want him to take my son. And we headed on our drive. My contractions at that point weren't like extremely strong, but I kind of had to like stop and think through each one. And I didn't really want to talk through them, but I could if I wanted to. We listened to a podcast on our way up. So when we got up north, I needed to pee really bad. And I told my husband. So at this point, it was like midnight, maybe. Oh, no. We left the valley around midnight. So it was around 2 a.m. So he pulled over in Spanish Fork. And there is nowhere open in Spanish Fork at 2 a.m. So he's driving around crazy.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, "We're going to get pulled over. Like, I really don't, like, I don't need to pee bad enough that we should get pulled over." And so we saw a cop, and I was like, okay, we're being pulled over for sure. And my crazy husband, like, pulled in front of the cop and turned on his hazard lights and rolled down his window, and like thinking that the cop would roll down his window and talk to him, but he didn't. He like turned on his lights and pulled us over. And my husband, when he came to the window, my husband was like, "My wife is in labor and she needs to use the bathroom so bad. We can't find anywhere to go to the bathroom."
Oh my gosh.
And at this point, I was like, "I'm going to kill you."
Yes.
And so the cop told us where we could go, and we tried both the places he told us, and they were both closed. So I was like, "Just go to American Fork. I can hold it. I don't care." So we finally found a place to go to the bathroom at American Fork, and my like whole stomach like dropped down because I had that much pee in me.
Yeah, that full bladder can keep that baby right hanging out up there.
Yeah. And the gas station attendant, and my husband was talking to him, and he gave him a free cigar, a celebratory cigar to smoke after.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. So we went and got food because I told my husband that they wouldn't let us eat in the hospital. And then we went to the hospital, and we took our stuff up to the doors, and I just like clenched up. I was like, oh my gosh, I do not want to be here. I do not want to be trapped in those doors. So we just left our bags kind of by the door and went and walked around the hospital. So it was probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. We walked around the hospital for an hour or so. I just had to like stop and lean over on the wall and shake my hips with every contraction. And then finally we went up to be admitted. I was just really feeling like I could use like a shower or to rest. So she checked me and she was like, yeah, you're a 1, maybe a 2. And I felt so defeated.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, so I felt like so defeated because with my first, I came in at a 4. So I kind of expected to at least be there. And she was like, so what we can do is you can stay here for an hour. And if you progress, you know, you have to be at least like almost a 5 for us to admit you. So we did that, and my husband slept on the floor. And after the hour had passed, she came in and she was like, so are you feeling contractions? And I was like, yeah. And I guess the monitor hadn't been hooked up onto my stomach right, so they saw no contractions the whole time I was there. Yeah. So she checked me again and she was like, yeah, you're the same. And I was just feeling really defeated. And she told me on her way out, she said, I hope you go into labor soon. And I wanted to kill her. I was like, are you serious?
Oh my gosh. That is awful.
Yeah.
After you just driven so much, and then to go through all of that. Oh, I can't believe she had the nerve to say that. Oh my God.
I know. And I just gave her like a sarcastic, like, thanks. And so we got into the car. We were going to head to a hotel. And I had a breakdown. Like, I just started crying. And I was like, if it's going to be like this, I just want the C-section. I was like, I don't know what to do, you know. And my husband was like, it's going to be okay. Like, you really want this. Like, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Let's go get some sleep. And, you know, we'll be all right. So we got to the hotel. And this whole time, like, I had been just shaking. Like, I don't know why I get the shakes just super, super bad in labor. So my husband laid down and I got into the shower. And the shower just picked up my contractions so much. Like, it felt really good through the contractions, but everything just started to progress really fast. I started to lose my mucus plug. I got to like the point where I was like, I don't think I can get out of this shower. Like, I don't know how I'm going to leave the shower.
Hotel shower, baby, anyone?
Yeah. So I tried to get, after like an hour or 2, I think it was 2 hours of being in the shower. Thank goodness for like hotel water heaters. I tried to get into the bed with my husband, and that was like the worst mistake ever. Like, it felt so miserable. I couldn't even get into the sheets. I just got right back into the shower. But that woke up my husband, and he comes in and he's like, babe, this is getting kind of serious. And I was like, yeah, no kidding. So he started packing everything up. He came in to like get me dressed and get me out of there. And I was like, no, we're not going to leave. We're just going to have the baby here. And he was like, no way is that going to happen. Come on, let's go. That's like his worst nightmare.
My husband's too. He's like, I don't care where you give birth. You just have to make sure I'm not the only one in the room.
Yeah. He like is petrified of home birth anyways. That's like a whole nother argument. So by then my contractions were like right on top of each other. So like walking before we like went out into the hallway, and our room was like the very last room. So it was like right next to the doors outside. So I had a contraction in the hotel room, in the hallway, and then right as soon as we got outside. Oh. And I told my husband in the hallway, I was like, I'm getting the epidural and don't you dare try to stop me. She was like, okay. So we went outside, and when I had that contraction, there was like a bunch of people all standing outside watching, and I was in labor land, so I didn't even notice or care. So my husband tries to get me in the passenger seat. He like opens up the door, and I just shook my head and like pointed to the back seat. And he's like, well, there's a bunch of stuff back there. And he like opens up the door, and I just climbed in on top of all this stuff and just laid down on top of it. So we were staying in Thanksgiving Point, and so driving to American Fork, I don't know if you guys remember this construction that was going on, but it was the worst construction ever.
Seriously, it's still going on, in case you wanted to know. It's just,
I'm sure.
the roads just curl different ways.
It was awful. So, and my husband was just driving crazy because he is super anxious, and he thought I was going to have the baby in the car. So he was freaking out, and it was awful. It was like the worst part ever. But thank goodness my contractions slowed down. So I only had like 3 contractions the whole time driving. So it wasn't too bad. Through my whole laboring with her, my contractions like sped up or slowed down, like depending on what was happening, which was kind of interesting. So we got to the hospital, and they checked me, and they said like a 4.5, maybe, or 5. So they admitted us. I told them, I was like, I don't know what I have to do to get on the list for the epidural, but put me on it. And they're like, okay.
Put me on the list.
They're like, so the anesthesiologist is doing a C-section right now, so it's probably going to be a couple hours. And then I was like, oh my gosh. So the ER anesthesiologist actually came up and did my epidural for me, which I was actually really thankful for. So after I got the epidural, the nurse told me that if I laid on my side immediately, that it wouldn't take evenly. So she said that I needed to wait at least an hour to lay on my side and do the peanut ball. So I waited that hour. It might have been like a little bit more. And they checked me, and they said I was complete. So I was super excited about that. Yeah. So yeah, I was kind of like in disbelief. She was like, oh yeah, you're complete. And I was like, complete? Like complete?
Like 10 complete?
Yeah, I was like 10 centimeters. And she was like, yep. And I was like, oh my gosh. She was like, well, you have like a really bulgy water bag. I think we should break it. And I was like really reluctant to do that. Just like anything that they wanted to do, I asked them like 100 different questions, which they were awesome with. So finally I agreed to do that. And then after that, they said that I had just like a little bit of a lip. So they said that we were just going to wait like a couple hours and check me again. So I did the peanut ball for that time, and I slept, which was really good. And then they checked me again, and they said that I was good and I could start pushing if I wanted to. So I was really nervous, and I just thought that like at any second something could go wrong and they were going to take me off to the C-section. So I was like, no, I don't think I'm ready. Can we just labor down for a while? And so she agreed, and she said, just tell me when you feel like you need to push. So she came back like an hour later, and I was like, I'm still not ready. So she said, okay, I'm going to go like assist in a C-section. So I'll be back in like 2 hours, and then we'll start pushing. So when she came back, I agreed to start pushing. The only problem then was I had thought to keep my epidural working, I thought I had to keep pushing the button. So my
oh no.
yeah. So when they first gave me the epidural, it was great. Like it was just enough to take the edge off, but I could still move my legs and stuff, and I could still feel the contractions. But by then I like was completely numb. Like I couldn't even move my legs or anything. So they had to, I don't think they turned off the epidural, but they just slowed it down a lot. So we started pushing. I pushed for maybe like an hour, and then we started to see the head. I did not believe that I was going to get my VBAC. Even when I saw the baby's head, it was in so much disbelief that it was really going to happen. And I just loved pushing. It was awesome. Even though I was like really numb, it just felt so good. It was like I finally got to fight for my VBAC.
Yes.
It just felt awesome. Yeah. So I pushed her out and it was awesome. She went immediately to me. We did skin to skin. I don't know if you guys saw my picture, but I was just ugly crying.
I saw it. It was so good.
Yeah. I was just like high. Like I was shaking. It just was amazing. Nobody even touched my baby for like an hour, maybe even more. She just stayed right on me. We did skin to skin and breastfeeding immediately. And I love the American Fork Hospital. It's awesome. They're like really naturally minded. For the most part, I like the nurses and it was awesome. The only thing that I really didn't like about it was they gave me Pitocin afterwards without telling me. So they just like put it into my IV and I was like, oh, what was that? And they're like, oh, it's Pitocin. You have to have it.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
Yeah, very
anymore.
common.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was like, why couldn't you tell me that before you just did it?
Which they should. They like everyone, anything that's going inside of your body, you should be told what's happening. But
right.
I mean, there's an episode on Dr. Stu and Dr. Stu's podcast. They talked about it, and a nurse wrote in because they were talking about this very topic, and a nurse wrote to them and said, I've never even thought about it. Never. Like, I just do it. And now that, like, they pointed it out, she's like, I'm totally going to think about this. Like, I need to ask. Like, it's just their routine. It's what they do because it's so standard. But, yeah, they should be asking for sure.
Oh, yeah. So one little thing that I forgot that I'm going to add in really fast. So I had a moment like before I met with the American Fork midwives, and I just had this moment where I was like, everybody wants me to have a C-section. Like, it would be so much easier if I just gave in and just had the C-section. But then I was like, would that really be what I want? And yes, it would be easier, but would that be the right thing for me and for my baby? And I just right then I decided, I'm going to fight for this VBAC. Like, no matter what I have to do, it's going to happen. I'm going to make myself a priority. I have to make myself and my baby a priority. And I never looked back after that.
Oh, I love that. Good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So proud of you. Very proud of you.
Thank you.
It's a good
I was
story.
high for 6 weeks. Anytime I just thought about it, I just got all bubbly and excited and it was awesome. I don't know why people do drugs when you could just have a vaginal birth.
I totally feel like I can relate though.
I'm like, I would have a baby once a week if I didn't have to care for a newborn afterwards.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when you're in labor, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never doing this again. And then right after, you're like, wow, I want to do this again, right now.
I know. My husband's like, do you not remember? I'm like, oh, I remember. He's like, no, clearly you don't.
Clearly.
Like, yeah. Clearly. No, I mean, I do. And he's like, no, you really don't remember.
Rick doesn't want another baby. But Megan would do it again.
Would do it again in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Do surrogacy or something.
Right? I have.
Yes, Megan, you should. Megan, we need to talk after
I know, right? My cousin is pondering that, and I'm just like, well, I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that.
It would be hard.
Would do it, but my husband is like, no, there's no way you're doing that.
No way.
My husband threw the foot down there too. And there's something to be said about, being a woman and standing up for yourself, even if your husband doesn't particularly like something about how you want to birth. But, he has to deal with me for 9 months when I'm pregnant. So, his vote kind of matters in that regard.
Yeah, and I've kind of had that problem with like, because now I'm like, I want home birth. And my husband is like, no, no way you're having a home birth. And I'm having like a struggle because if I ask for advice from like online, I even asked on the community, and women are like, well, it's your body, it's your birth, like you get to pick what you want to do. And I'm like, well, obviously I do, but I also want my husband to be a part of this with me.
You want to take into consideration his feelings too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if he's all worked up in the birth space at your house because he doesn't feel comfortable there, that stress is going to impose itself on you, and you're going to feel that, and that could cause issues with the normal progression of labor. So, yeah, it's all right. You've got a while to warm him up to it.
I know. And he was like, oh, if you could get the same midwife who did your VBAC to come do a home birth, then you can have a home birth. And I'm like, well, she is a hospital midwife. She can't do home births.
Idea. I'm a student midwife, and you just wait a few years to have her next baby, and I will come down there and deliver your baby. How about that?
That's
there you go.
And I was like, you know what? No matter what, I have to have a doula, you know, because I really feel like if I had a doula with my VBAC, that I wouldn't have had to have the epidural. I just didn't have anybody coaching me through like my first. And I was like, we could hire either Julie or Megan, and Julie's
both of us
training to be a midwife.
Yeah, Megan could be the doula and I could be the midwife, and we could just come to your house. It would be the best.
Be perfect.
Be the perfect team.
I just need to hurry up and get through my midwifery
Get on that,
training.
Julie. Yeah.
Well, you know, like I'm like the ball's rolling. From July on, I'm birth assisting with several different midwives each month, and I'm like, I'm moving. This is happening.
That's so exciting. I love birth. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really great. Well, we don't have much time left, but before we go, I wanted to ask you 2 questions that you filled out in your form. And if it's okay if you don't remember them, you can just make up new answers. We want to ask you, what is a secret lesson or something no one really talks about that you wish you would have known ahead of time when preparing for birth?
Oh, I think so. The biggest one is just birth positioning. So I really think that that's why I ended up having a C-section. You know, I didn't know about like spinning babies. I didn't know about keeping your belly hammock, you know, always leaning forward. With my VBAC, I was never on my back that whole pregnancy. I always kept forward or to the side. And the other thing is get a doula. I just really, honestly, I know that doulas are great when you have an epidural too, but if you want to have a natural birth, you need that kind of support. And then one other thing is, I think that every mother, I guess I should say mother, should learn how to safely bed share with their baby so that you don't fall asleep in unsafe positions with your baby.
Awesome.
What an awesome tip.
Yeah, I love that. All right. And next is, what is your best tip for someone preparing for VBAC?
Okay, I guess I kind of said that already.
You did. It's a different answer, though. Do you want me to read it?
My answer is, yeah.
Okay, you said it can feel scary and hard to advocate for yourself and fight for the birth you deserve, but it is so necessary and so worth it.
Oh, yes. Perfect. Yep, you have to make yourself a priority. Mothers are so used to just like sacrificing ourselves and just kind of like going with whatever is going to be the fastest and the easiest. But this is really important for you. It's really important for your baby. And it's a really good learning tip to just advocate for yourself, period, you know?
Absolutely. All right, Megan, would you add anything?
No, I just think those are awesome tips. And I obviously, as far as the doula, I obviously believe in a doula and a supportive team. And I am looking forward to one day hopefully being on your team.
Let's do it. Let's plan. Like 2023. It's kind of like the aim. All right. Hey, listen up. If you live in a rural area and that has a VBAC ban that you do not like and you want to fight, we've got a bunch of tips on our blog how to reverse VBAC bans. There's a long list there that you can work hard and advocate for in your own community so that more hospitals will be supportive of parents who are attempting a VBAC, also known as a TOLAC, trial of labor after cesarean. And we're actually going to link to that blog in the show notes so you can go and click there right now. And in the meantime, I've been wanting to go and talk with a specific midwife there about changing these hospital policies about VBAC bans down in your area, Becca. So one day we will get there, but for now, we have to advocate and stand up for ourselves.
Yes, I think they're really trying to get there. It's just they say that they're not allowed. So
yeah, but they are, and we just have to teach them.
Would you like to be a guest on the podcast? Head over to thevbaclink.com/share and submit your story. For more information on all things VBAC, including online and in-person VBAC classes, the VBAC blog, and Julie and Megan's bios, head over to thevbaclink.com. Congratulations on starting your journey of learning and discovery with the VBAC Link.